Okay, last but not least, we will explore Shmuel's attack, or Shmuel's discussion of this issue. Amar le Shmuel le Rav. Shmuel says to Rav, they're sitting in the Beit Midrash. We saw that Shmuel thinks the prohibition here is because of the residue from the non-kosher vessels. Rav thinks the prohibition of shemen is because of the gezerah of Daniel. So Shmuel says to Rav, Bishlama ledidi, it is good for me, all's good and well, in my side of the argument, de'amina zlifatan shel kelim asurim osutan, because I think that the zlifatan shel kelim asurim, the residue from non-kosher vessels, is what causes the oil, the shemen, to be asur. Hainu, it is this. This explains that when Techiata Rabbi Yitzchak bar Shmuel bar Marta, it explains that time that Rabbi Yitzchak bar Shmuel bar Marta came and told us, Ve'amar Darish Rav Simlai ben Nitzivin, he told us about a drush, he told us about a shir of Rav Simlai in a town called Nitzivin. And in that shir, apparently, according to the second-hand account that we're now receiving from Rabbi Yitzchak bar Marta in the name of Rav Simlai, he said that shemen, with regards to shemen, Rav Yehuda Beit Dino nimnu alav v'hitiruhu. Rav Yehuda and his Beit Din nimnu, they voted on it, they discussed it, and they examined it, and they allowed shemen. They allowed shemen produced by idol worshippers to be consumed. They essentially, according to Rav Simlai, they overturned the prohibition discussed in our Mishnah. They overturned that prohibition, and now instead of shemen being forbidden, now because of Rav Yehuda and his Beit Din, it is now permitted. According to Shmuel, who thinks that the whole prohibition originally was because of the residue from non-kosher vessels, he says it's highlighted in green because, according to Shmuel, this makes perfect sense. Shmuel says, Kasavar, they think, the logic they're applying here is that Notein tam lifgam mutar is the halachic principle that states that if something imparts taste, in this case, the unkosher, non-kosher taste from the kelim to the oil, if it does so in a way that is a pigam, that is detrimental to the oil, so that is mutar. Obviously, we're not transferring actual non-kosher food. If there was pieces of non-kosher meat that's being thrown into the oil, whether or not that's detrimental for the oil, not kosher. But in this case, we have a ta'am, not actual non-kosher, but ta'am of non-kosher. Residue from these pots that were used once to cook non-kosher food is being transferred to the oil, and Shmuel says the reason why they're now permitting this, despite this transfer of residue, makes perfect sense. It's because of the principle of notein ta'am lifgam mutar. So originally, according to Shmuel, there's a prohibition because of the residue, and then subsequently, Rav Yehuda and his Beit Din overturned that prohibition on the basis of the principle of notein ta'am lifgam mutar. Now he begins his attack. So far that's his defense of his own position. But he says, now, Ela l'titcha, but rather for you, for your position, de amarta, because you said that Daniel Gazar, you said the whole reason behind the prohibition of oil is because of the gezerah of Daniel. So Daniel Gazar, ve'ata Rav Yehuda nase u'mevatale, could it be that Daniel passed an enactment, passed a gezerah, and now Rav Yehuda Hanasi is coming, he arrives, ve'ata, it's one of our vocab words, ve'ata Rav Yehuda Hanasi u'mevatale, now Rav Yehuda is coming and nullifying or voiding that prohibition? How could that be? Ve'hatnan, behold, we have learned in a Mishnah that ein Beit Din yechol levatel divrei Beit Din chaveiro. The bell's ringing. We learned in a Mishnah that one Beit Din is not allowed to overrule the ruling of a sister Beit Din, of an earlier Beit Din. If one Beit Din is not allowed to overturn the rulings of a previous Beit Din, how in the world could Rav Yehuda Hanasi have overturned the gezerah of Daniel? Sorry, let's just finish the line here. V'hatanan ein Beit Din yechol levatel divrei Beit Din chaveiro. One Beit Din cannot override the ruling of a previous Beit Din, of its friend, literally. Elim ken gadol imenu b'chachma v'inyan. Unless that Beit Din is greater in number and minyan. We're of course assuming that the Beit Din of Yehuda Hanasi was not greater than the Beit Din of Daniel the prophet. So therefore, if that's the case, if Daniel passed a gezerah, how in the world, asks Shmuel, could it be possible that Rav Yehuda Hanasi would now overturn that gezerah. Amar le, Rav now replies, Simlai Ludai Kamarta? Are you referring to Rav Simlai from Lud, from the town of Lud? You're basing, remember, Shmuel bases his whole attack on Rav, on this report that the Rav Yehuda Nasi had overturned the ruling of, according to, had overturned the prohibition of oil. So Rav responds, Simlai Luda Kamarta? Are you using, you're attacking me on the basis of a report by Rav Simlai of Lud? Shani Ludai Dimizalzulu. The people of Lud they're not careful with mitzvot. They're transgressors. Of course, Rav Simlai would come and report that they overturned the prohibition. They have disregard for mitzvot. Essentially, Rav is challenging the report, the authenticity of the report, that the prohibition of oil was ever overturned. According to Rav, at this point, the prohibition was never overturned. It couldn't ever be overturned because once Daniel passed a gezerah, no beitin could subsequently overrule that. So Shmuel says, Amar le eshlach le, do you want me to send for Rav Simlai, and maybe we'll ask him in person whether or not this is an actual authoritative, authentic report? Ichsif. Rav now replies quietly. He goes pale. He goes white. He's now nervous that perhaps he's embarrassed. Now perhaps he's wrong. And as we learned in our Gemara subsequently, Rav tries to discover a reason to defend, a way to defend his rationale, his theory that the whole prohibition was because of the gezerah of Daniel. Rav continues to develop that defense later in the Gemara.